If you've been around for a while, like the very beginning of the channel, you're probably wondering, didn't you do this before? And yeah, I did. But man, oh man, let's just say it was all over the place. Had a shaky first impression and kind of spiraled out of control with some weird nitpicks. That was a few years ago now, so this time, I just want a fresh start. And the best way to do that is just to main axle. Think that'll get me to really engage with mechanics as intended. So, let's give this another go. This is Combat Overview. Here we go over the general controls, the mechanics, who and what we use them on, and then seeing how it all comes together. The tried and true jab. You might not know it now, but this will be your new best friend. So, they're very fast, has solid range, and leads to a solid combo. Okay, there's a few important details we should know about it first. From how it affects enemies and how we use that to our advantage within the game's combo framework or structure. Now, as you punch an enemy, notice how much hit stun they're in. It actually lasts long enough for us to pause and reset our jabs from the beginning, allowing us to extend our combo even longer, since they're not sent flying so soon, right? You can imagine if we just get the timing down, we can loop this forever. Well, not exactly. So around 8 hits, I think, the enemy will eventually fall out and topple over. So there is an anti-infinite system, which is a good thing to have since it avoids cheesy strats. And who wants to play a game where enemies can't fight back? Now with these limits in mind, we can use this jab reset in so many ways. Like I said earlier, it does a damn good job to better our combo starters, which as you'll see later on, really lets us get the most out of every punish we find, especially on bosses. Not only that, but we can sort of stall for time too, allowing those stragglers to walk into the combo, or we can stall long enough to catch enemies on wake up. You don't want to be an in lag when they're free to attack, right? Or you can use this moment to lock an enemy down, so you can keep an eye out for what everyone else is doing or about to do. All this seems very simple now, but trust me, the sooner you take advantage of this, the better, because it helps a lot in higher difficulties to manage larger crowds or to make sure you really hurt high priority targets when given the chance. But even when I was playing a new character that I knew absolutely nothing about, it allowed me to have a consistent way to damage any enemy type or boss without having to learn specific combo routes. There's still more use cases for this, but just for now, remember that no matter what your skill level may be, this will always be useful. Now onto something that isn't the back attack. To be honest with you, I never used this. It could just be the characters I played, but I never found it useful compared to those jabs and the list of other defensive options to avoid attacks from all angles. I could be missing something here, but don't be too surprised if you forget it's even a thing. Our charge attack, on the other hand, is pretty good. So if you hold jab, you'll prep a charge attack. Have this yellow glare over your character to let you know when it's ready. But yeah, these usually have great range to poke, and even crowd control since the enemy will knock down anyone along the way, and there's always a strong follow-up on wall bounces. To me, it's a more situational move. You need the right place and right time to use it because when you're surrounded by enemies, the last thing I wanted to do was stop attacking to get a move out. Cool thing is though, it can be charged during other actions, so that opens up more ways to sneak this out from time to time. Now the blitz attack. This move is extremely underrated. And that's because it kind of does it all. So it's a mix between a dash attack and a DP from fighting games. So it's a fully invulnerable move that covers a lot of distance in front of you. Not only is it a good combo ender to your jabs, but it shuts down airborne enemies, can outrange grounded enemies that have some reach to their attacks. And it also OTGs. So after you knock down an enemy, you can still hit anything on the floor to tack on a little bit more damage. Some blitz attacks dribble enemies, allowing you to continue combos even further. But from what I can tell, you can't OTG the same enemy more than twice before it won't work anymore. So there's another anti-infinite system. But yeah, this move is pretty insane, and since most characters don't fly into the air for a brief moment and then have to deal with the extended end lag after falling back down, can kinda mash these out. Still need to know enemy patterns, but it's pretty damn strong. Sometimes I wonder if it should have just been a Z motion input instead of a simple double tap. Let's make the execution barrier more demanding to match its power type of thing. Because with how it is now, you can easily toss this out on reaction to snuff out any attack. So if you haven't given the blitz much thought, well, I think you should the next time you play. Now here's something every beat 'em up lives and dies on: the grab. So here it's automatic, just need to walk up to the enemy and there you go. You can do a little pummel, which for most sets up a combo, Of course, we can toss them either behind or in front of us, just flooring any crowded area, and during that throw, you're fully invulnerable as well. So not only is this a defensive option, but an offensive one too. You can use this to reposition enemies or yourself, it crowd controls as it should, and most importantly, can prevent really dangerous formations or to escape them. Now, it's always a good idea to walk towards an enemy diagonally. Pretty classic, but it works for a reason. We close a gap for one, but we're not right in their line of fire the entire time as we do that either. So be sure to use the space that's given to you. But if you need to approach them head on, use your jab. Because remember, it leaves them staggered for quite a long time, which makes that walk up a bit more safe. And if you're ever in a situation where an enemy is heading your way as you're comboing someone, that jab reset gives us some leeway to quickly adapt and set up a grab on the fly. And lastly, aerial attacks. Neutral air is pretty short, but it knocks them away from you, so it's a get off me attack, or pretty solid to follow up on those wall bounces too. Forward aerial is just a good way to close the gap with an attack, so you don't have to worry about enemies hitting you as you walk in, or to just floor an entire crowd since it sends them flying. Down air can be done in place or moving towards an enemy. It has short range, but the cool thing is, it doesn't send enemies away from you. Instead, it has similar hit stun as our basic jabs, which means this is more of a combo starter. I like how we get a few aerial options that don't feel copy and pasted. There's real utility between all three, and that goes a long way to not just fill a specific niche, but it lets us make some real smart plays because what we toss out actually matters. That's how it's done right, and goes to show how much thought went into every aspect of our kit. Onto defenses, the usual stuff we went over so far. So positioning matters, need to watch where you stand, but also know how to manage that space of yours so you don't get crowded. But if there is a crowd, throws deal with that perfectly. The iframes are +2. And just in general, the game follows the best defense is a good offense line of thinking. So being familiar with your moves and what they do is very important too. Now this might remind you of something else, but jumps have iframes on the way up, just like DMC. So you can jump in place or to either side and you'll be invulnerable. Or if you get set flying either by an enemy tossing you or just by taking a massive hit, just hold jump a little bit before making contact with the ground. The window is pretty lenient, so don't worry about it being a very precise thing to pull off. But yeah, this lets us recover a whole lot sooner so we can quickly get back into the action. There's one more thing, but we'll go over that in the next section. Looking at the HUD, it's pretty straightforward. Have our health bar that we really need to keep track of, so be ready to learn all of those health drops. Now we have ourselves some specials, starting off with a neutral defensive special. It's this short range attack that covers you entirely, so it'll come in handy to stop approaching enemies no matter what the angle, or to clear the nearby area if you're surrounded. And to really make sure this helps, you're fully invulnerable during the entire thing, which makes it the get off me attack. And luckily you can use this on reaction too, so when you really need it, it'll bail you out. Forward special. This one is more for the combo potential with this longer range. Thing is though, it has no iframes. It does have a disjoint, so it can hit enemies before they reach you. But if they get through or around this hitbox, yeah, you'll be hit out of it. But other than that, these are pretty fun to use, especially since they're all very different. Cherry's forward special is great to OGG, Adam has crazy crowd control potential and wall bounce setup, and Floyd's is insanely good. Can kinda infinite bosses with it if you're not interrupted by nearby enemies. But yeah, these really help defining each character's unique strengths, which I like to see. Makes it that much more fun to try the entire roster. But we also have an aerial special. This one I rarely used. It's not bad or anything, I just have a more grounded playstyle and really jump is all. But from the little I used them, they're all different from character to character, same as forward specials. So it'd be a cool little learning process to see what they can do. Now something to keep in mind about using specials, with each one you toss out, it uses a bit of our health. So it's continuing that very classic trope, but Streets of Rage 4 also adds a little twist to how we play around it. Because that health we exchange to use our specials can actually be refunded. So with each basic attack you land, those hits go to restoring that great health of ours. Now we're given the chance to regain it all back and continue to toss out more specials. Really encourages players to get back into the fight. And even if the enemy is already done for, you can still get some health back by keeping them in that combo. So you can get creative to really get the most out of each attack you land. But I've also learned that you don't have to overcomplicate it and think you have to remember all sorts of combos to use this mechanic. Nah, just using that stagger jab reset into blitz lets you land a lot of hits to regain health without much hassle. When I was going through the game with every character, this really helped me to get things started as I figured out their combo routes along the way. I'm telling you guys, those delayed jabs are insanely useful for every situation of the game, no matter what character you play or what your skill level. Just don't get too carried away, because playing sloppy and getting yourself hit will not only lose all that great health of ours, but also take extra damage on top of that from that hit. So skill players who are knowledgeable about the ins and outs of the game will be rewarded, and that's what I really like about this sort of mechanic, because it asks us to play smart and consistent. It's what the best of the best are all about, right? Okay, last up are these stars. Since we just looked at Shinobi, I would compare them to that since they're kinda similar. So we begin each stage with just the one, but we can find more along the way. They'll be hidden, so just like those health pickups, it'll be a good idea to remember these. Now, stars are very powerful attacks that are fully invulnerable, OTGs, extends combos, solid range to crowd control, and yeah, it basically does it all. With these, we can either use them to ease up on those problem fights during the stage you might have trouble with, or you can save them for the boss at the end. They do less and less damage with each difficulty, but it doesn't stop them from being useful. And that's because they break their hyper armor, so it's a way to deny their turn and take yours back. It also lets you do some wild combos. You can either start with it, or to extend a punish of yours even further. Or maybe don't use them at all and get extra points toward reaching S rank at the end. So there's a few ways to work with these. It's just entirely up to you on how you want to use these, and leads to all sorts of different strategies. When it comes to enemies, holy, this is one of the best enemy lineups around. And that's because they all have very distinct attacks, clear tells, and they force us to rethink our approach. So let's start this long rundown with Galcias. They're here to fill the screen and will do this simple jab if you let them get too close. But even though he's the lowest of the low, you don't want to underestimate the power. Because it's not a matter of if, but when he shows up with a knife, be ready for that rushdown blade first. He's a very infamous enemy because of that, but don't let that scare you, because he's a very one-track mind enemy. Can just make a wide arc to avoid that charge, can time a blitz attack, or use a special to be sure. Jump-ins will do the job every time, and of course a simple jump in place to iframe through his attack is great too. Those are my go-to because they set up a knockdown, and knockdowns will instantly disarm enemies right then and there, so definitely remember that. Signals, the kind of wait and see enemy type, where they're a hang in the back most times, but once you start fighting, then they'll make their move. These guys are pretty sneaky because of that. So when they crouch, they're about to sweep your ankles with a slide. So just gotta jump. Or when they blink red, that's their cue that they're going for a grab. And similar to fighting games, jumping is a really good option to avoid that grab attempt. But if jumping is too risky in that moment, defensive specials are always a great defensive option too. There's recolors as the game goes on, and they only become more intelligent, doing extra bob and weaves to fake you out, and second guess their actions. Donovan. Honestly, these guys are pretty passive too. But unlike signals, they want to be nearby and wait. And that's because they'll be the first ones to punish you with their short-range attack if you do something dumb. Now you would think if they're so stubby, let me just jump in on them. You'll soon learn about his specialty, and that's anti-airs. He's really consistent with them too. Might be best to just keep both feet on the ground around him. So just make your way in and just be cautious of the little punch of theirs. Now if Galcias really like their bladed weapons, then Donovan's really like blunt objects. So if there's a bat or pipe lying around, yeah, he'll probably make his way towards it. This is a massive buff for him because he'll instantly swing at you once you're in range, going from a more or less standoffish enemy with short range to this fully aggro enemy that will outrange majority of your attacks. You can use that against him, because I've noticed once he has a weapon, he can no longer anti-air. He'll try to swat you away, but it whiffs since we have iframes on our jumps. Or my favorite option is to use Blitz. It clears that gap with full iframes, letting us move on through that attack of his with ease. Dylan. These guys are sneaky too, Because at first they'll keep their distance and watch. But once you turn your back to them, now they want to close in. And when you're facing them and walk them down, they instantly back up. So these guys want to sandwich you if you let them be. But yeah, if you keep them at bay, they'll eventually do this little squat. From there, they'll just speed walk towards you so they can get in range to headbutt. Honestly, you can just mash any attack because they'll just walk into it every time. Also, I'll recommend you don't jump at these guys because they also anti-airs. They're not as consistent like Donovan's, so you might get away with a few, but it's better to play smart. There's a yellow and pink recolor, and these guys always do their flying kick at you after that little squat. To deal with that, I either sidestep or use my blitz. But yeah, those recolors are way more aggro than the basic version, so keep an eye on those. Ruby. These girls want to dive kick you as soon as you line up with them. Kinda tracks you mid-air and seems to hit between lanes too, so it's hard to reposition around her. They do go a set distance, so you can walk away and avoid it that way. But I just react to the towel and use blitz to anti-air. If you don't have enough time to set that up, then use that defensive special to be extra sure. Raven. Instead of doing downward diagonal attacks like Ruby, these guys do the opposite with their rising knee. Can imagine he's really good against all area options, so let's stay on the ground. Well, these guys have some crazy range with their kicks, and they know how to use them too because you'll notice real quick how good they are with their spacing. So just holding forward will only make it easier for them to poke you and then go into their own little combo. But if you do manage to get in close, just look out for the block. Mashing won't get you far either because they'll just do their counterattack. It won't be instant though, so you have a chance to adjust and go in for the grab to open them up. These guys ask a lot more from you than the past enemies, since they're pretty good against both ground and airborne options, as well as mashing. But here's what I do. As soon as I'm in a certain range, I blitz attack. It's kind of a wild option select. Doesn't matter what they do since we're moving in with full iframes, right? So this will hit them if they stick any limb out, and it'll anti-air the kick. But if they block it, so what? Now we're in their face to grab soon afterwards. Like I said, blitz is crazy good if you know when to toss it out. Kubos. They don't kick or even punch you. Instead, they really like using weapons. So not only do they hit hard, but they have solid range to chase you down. But if you manage to get far away, they'll either throw it at you, but you can catch it, which is pretty cool, or they use telekinesis to pick up all the weapons in the room and send them flying away. But as long as you're close up, he never does these from my experience. Honestly, one-on-one he's a pushover, so don't stay far away too long because that'll prevent a lot of his annoyed attacks. And it helps that they don't have much defensive options to stop this, other than this high jump to land on top of you. If you play DMC, you'll know exactly what to do. Time your jump and be ready to punish that in-lag. Victoria. These girls toss Molotovs, poison, electricity, and explosive grenades. Most of these leave some kind of lingering attack to cover the entire area, so if you let them be for too long, they'll make it way more difficult to move around the room. But from what we learned fighting Kubos, we can catch these, so you can go for the interception and return to sender. Now these officers. The ones in blue are pretty slow, but get too close and they'll go in for the gut punch. Can easily jump in on them since they have no answer to it. But yeah, they're very straightforward and more of the grunt here. The ones wearing fluorescent yellow will run up and hold you down so your enemies can gang up on you. Whenever you grab, just mash the D-pad and the attack button. But remember, when you see enemies flash red, they're going for the grab, and we should know how to deal with that by now. The ones wearing black are the most dangerous ones, and that's because he'll have a taser in hand. Not only that, but he has this crazy fast command grab to catch you off guard if you're not paying attention. But he only does a forward grab, so he'll whiff if you walk away slightly after you bait this out. Now that taser is no different from knives and bats, which means we can do a jump in to knock it out of his hands. And if you notice, this guy will instantly just beeline to pick it up. He doesn't care about you at that point, and he only wants his weapon back. So let's use that to our advantage. We can keep him occupied for a while to buy time, or we can just take it away from him. And yeah, the blitz attack works the same way when we dealt with armed Donovans. To me, this little archetype is pretty damn fun. And it's a perfect example on how to make good recolors. There is one more police type enemy, and they have this shield baton combo. His only attack is this downward swipe. Just look out for that raised arm and be ready to iframe through it with whatever you like. You can jump, defensive special, blitz works too. Just keep this up until you break that energy shield. Can't do any damage otherwise, but once it is, you'll get enough time to land a guaranteed combo before that shield comes back. Big bands. These guys were annoying at first, but now they're pushovers. So these guys have a lot of range and hyper armor at all times as they charge you down. Pretty easy to see why they're tough to deal with, but you guys probably know by now, use Blitz. It'll just deny them instantly. I'm sure some really good force specials can outrange them too, but Blitz is always my go-to. Then there's a sort of beige recolor. They do a rising attack and come down with the belly flop that tracks you. It's very difficult to sidestep, so I use the best move in the game, Blitz. And lastly, this blue recolor. Once you're close, he'll do 3 back-to-back rolls that are fully armored. Blitz attack doesn't work as well, honestly, so I rely on jumping instead before going in for the punish. Goro. You do not want to mash on this guy because he'll go into this counter stance and will instantly punish you, sending you flying across the stage to start from square one again. So we need to play smart. To do that, let's stand in front of him, but with some distance between us, because once you're lined up, he'll do this forward punch that has a lot of armor, of course, but luckily for us, it's a straight line. We can either sidestep it, can iframe jump through it. I use that jump mainly because I want to be sure to land a solid combo on him since he's pretty tanky. There's a red recolor we fight 1 or 2 times, and instead of the forward punch, he'll just rush you down with the 100-hand slap. But just like Dylan's, we can time our jab so he'll just walk right into him. Sugar. Whenever you see her lean back, she's about to unleash a powerful headbutt. She actually has a bit of tracking to it, as well as armor, so it makes sidestepping this a bit difficult to pull off. But since her attack goes a set distance, you can just walk away or jump. And I don't mention enough, but setting up throws is a great way to stop those larger enemies in general. And since there's more than one usually, be ready for them to attack you from all these different ranges and timings. It kind of gets us to use everything we know. Gotta watch where you stand, use jab resets to stop for time, of course use blitz on reaction if possible, iframe jumps, and use throws to really manage the situation. Pretty fun to fight him because of that. And that's just for the one enemy type. So as you can imagine, when the game starts to mix and match all these varied enemies in one group, things get pretty interesting. For example, when we fight Goro and Raven, this team up makes it a bit tricky to jump over Goro's forward attack, since Raven is close by to just anti-air us. And for Raven, we can't slowly make our way in anymore, since Goro destroys you if you stand still for too long. So they kinda cover each other's weaknesses. And not only that, but they both block or counter too, which means you better not mash and know exactly what you're doing. Even the stages, they play a massive part in this too. And that's because every stage has their own gimmick or hazard. So it's not just new enemy types that are being introduced, there's also explosive barrels, exposed wiring, bottomless pits, pulls of toxic waste, sweeping signs, a car to just ram into the wall, and of course, any beat 'em up worth their salt has to have an elevator section. Just don't fall off. Yeah, one of my favorite examples of this is in stage 5. There's a section where you kinda locked in to this thin vertical slice. And on the outside are a few Dylans just waiting to use our flying kicks. Well, my go-to pick, Blitz, is tossed out the window since using that will only get me hit by that steam. So, I'll sidestep against these guys instead. So yeah, this game is constantly combining different layouts with past enemies to keep things interesting from start to finish. Really makes us rethink our entire approach. So even though we're just marching along from room to room just to fight, doesn't mean we can't fit in some good level design. And this game definitely proves that. Man, since I'm already at it, just rambling on, might as well talk about one more thing before we get into those boss fights, and that's hyper armor. Because coming back to this game, I've noticed just how common it is. Every enemy has it in some way, especially bosses, where it's active at all times pretty much, now only vulnerable to hit stun after you punish specific attacks. Which is exactly how one of the best boss fights ever made is designed, Virgil in DMC3. So to me, hyper armor isn't a bad idea to challenge the player, main reason being that it pushes us away from mindless mashing, discouraging reckless plays, and actively punishing us for not learning from those mistakes. Since flailing, spamming buttons won't work, it has us stop and think instead. And I don't see that as a problem. If hyper armor is the answer to keep our pretty powerful characters in check, then hey, I think it gets the job done. Because in order to succeed in this game, we need to know how to reposition, know who to prioritize, know how to approach them, know how to properly crowd control, and know what defensive option is best in the current enemy grouping. Which is what we had to do in some way in both DMC3 and Rise of the Ronin at times, since they also have a lot of hyper armor enemies. So when a game needs me to actually respect my opponent's options, in this case hyper armor attacks, it has me think about what I toss out and really learn enemy patterns. And I'd rather have that than the mind-numbing mash fest where these cannon fodder enemies have no way to fight back. But we also can't forget about clear visual and audio cues too, right? Especially some sort of ticket system. You can tell enemies take their turns in all these games. See it in DMC, see it here, Fight and Rage, and the list goes on. Might not seem like it since these games move so fast, but it's there, and for good reason. Because when there's a blob of enemies just tossing out overlapping hyper armor attacks as they rush you down with no breaks, yeah, it becomes a mess and not very fun, which is something you actually want to have. So as much as I think hyper armor can play a role to let enemies fight back so they can still be this obstacle to overcome, it's not that simple. It's only a small part of a larger picture. Because who could have known? The enemy design is an extremely complex and difficult balancing act that requires a lot of fine-tuning. It's the main reason why it makes or breaks a good action game for me. But yeah, all that to say, Streets of Rage 4 does a damn good job figuring that puzzle out, and the reason why its combat is so rewarding to learn. Bosses. First up is Diva. The main attack you want to look out for is that forward poke with her snake. She picks up a leg and leaps back before attacking, so you'll be able to see it coming. Just bait it out by walking across her line of sight and going for the punish afterwards. But she also has this AoE attack that'll get you away from her. A lot more in startup, so you have time to run away, but don't mash. I mentioned it before, but you can't just attack them for free and expect to get away with it, because that won't stop their attacks and you'll most likely take a massive hit. So just look out for that white glare to let you know there's hyper armor, and you'll know when to back off. But once they toss out a move, then they're vulnerable. So if you're close enough, you can make your way in to start your punish. That's just how it is for everything in this game, really. Bait, reposition, and then punish. The Commissioner. If he jumps all the way to either far end, he'll zoom across the screen with the command grab. As long as you're not in his path, you'll be fine. I just sidestep to avoid it and go from there. If you're too close, just watch out for that overhead attack of his. Takes a while, so you'll be able to pick up on what he's about to do so you can move out the way. Keep in mind, when you bring a boss's health down to about halfway, they'll go into phase 2. From here, they will either add a new move or extend previous ones. So these bosses are always mixing it up. For Nora, at the start, she'll buff the 2 Gaussias. And now they have constant hyper armor on them. Luckily they can be grabbed, so definitely use that 2 crowd control instead of trying to punch him. So just be on the lookout for him as you chase down the main boss, because she's on the move the whole time. But as long as you stay on her tail, she'll never get the chance to buff any more of them. And honestly, she's pretty passive, since she rarely wants to fight you head on. Has 1 or 2 whip attacks, but you won't see him much. But yeah, I just try my best to get her on the left side of the room, since there's a spiked wall there, and we can use that to deal even more wall supply damage. Sets up for some nice follow-ups, that's for sure. For Estelle, you want to do constant movement, mainly away from her slightly. Because if you're too close, she'll instantly attack you once you're in her bubble. Like Ravens, right? And since she works kinda similar, the blitz attack can work to shut her down. But if you stay away from her, just keep an eye out for that flying kick. And that's because she's punishable afterwards. Phase 2, she'll call in some backup, either more cops to fill the screen, or she'll do a little callback to Streets of Rage 1 special attack, having this main palm strike to cover the arena for a while. Can be annoying since it aims for you every time, cutting your combo shorter than you like, so it's another reason why to stay on the move the best you can. Barbon, his main attack is his gut punch if you're too close, and is way too fast for me to consistently bait it out and not get hit, so I try to keep my distance. And doing this will have him charge you with some kicks. So when he squats, be ready to dodge 2 back-to-back kicks, which have some tracking. I usually just jump over these because it's the fastest defensive option to keep up with these attacks. Now for that last kick, I try to follow him mid-air so I can land close enough to follow up. Phase 2 has him do 4 kicks now, so just keep that in mind. I do try my best to get him to end up on the left side of the screen, because it lets me use that wall to set up a pretty good combo. And as a reminder, use those jab resets to really get the most out of these openings, because that damage will add up. Now if he goes on the right side, he can actually destroy those bikes. And with each one that's broken, the owner will join in on the fight against you. For Shiva, I'm sure you've noticed the pattern by now, but doing some in and out movement is pretty strong. Requires right spacing though, but I usually stay around medium range and wait for either that palm strike of his or that quick swipe. But if you happen to be too far away, he'll do 2 overhead kicks. So once he's done with that, just do what you gotta do. And as you can tell, this is why Axel has become a favorite of mine. His kit seems like it was built to destroy single targets when given the chance. But yeah, after this we rematch Estelle and the Commissioner at the same time. She still has the same moves, but this time she'll toss grenades. So you really need to watch your step. It isn't too bad of a rematch fight, because unlike Beast Rider, at least these two have completely different patterns. So it's actually fun to fight them this way since this grouping has us rethink our strats a bit. And then we have another rematch, but this time we're up against 2 divas. The same exact attacks as before, but they use different elements. Instead of electricity, we have to deal with fire and poison. Plus their attacks affect us differently. Like poison slowing down our movement, and the fire attack of hers has a lot more reach. Again, these slight changes is enough to make this fight different enough. But yeah, it's fun to try and group them together, so you can land a pretty solid combo. Max. He is all armor at all times, which means he doesn't have a single moment of vulnerability to start some sort of guaranteed punish. So there won't be much to get away with if you mash. But I like this change. Really test your timing and positioning like no other fight. Bit of a risk-reward decision making going on here too, because you want to squeeze in as many hits as you can before he swats you away with his powerful attacks. So that right there is enough to change this whole dynamic of his fight. But yeah, if you're up close, he'll do the spin attack in place. There's 3 full rotations that you just have to wait around until it ends. Sometimes I ready a charge attack to instantly land a pretty powerful attack. You can also bring in a weapon into this fight to land some easy hits here too. He will mix in this soldier charge. We'll stay in the startup for a good while to give us time to land a few hits before we make a break for it. But yeah, wait for that quick sprite change because that's our cue to jump. He'll do 3 of these, but still be on the lookout because there are moments where he'll add a 4th attack just to catch you off guard. There's a few more moves, but I want to end with this. His fight is where I learned that stars break through hyper armor. I mentioned this before, but if you're having trouble with that, then save your stars for this fight. DJ Washi. He's a projectile heavy boss, and similar to something like Cerberus and DMC3, each attack is color coded. So green will send out these 2 discs on this wave-like path, kind of like Medusa heads. To easily avoid them, I'll stand above him, and that's because the first disc will always move down, so it'll just whiff us entirely. Blue will have these 2 rapid shots fired away directly in front of him. Very easy to dodge with a single sidestep. And red will send out this large fireball. Same thing, I just sidestep or even jump in can work here too. But that's not all because he has an energy shield similar to those guards from the beginning. So it must be broken first before we can deal actual damage. So just make sure to get the most out of that opening because he'll instantly put that guard up when you end your combo. Mr. Y. You don't want to be in front of him, and that's because he's constantly shooting his gun if you do. So try your best to approach him diagonally. He's also a boss with a lot of armor, so just expect to land a few hits before he runs away. And whenever he goes to the highest corners of the rooms, he'll do these sweeping shots. But yeah, during his second phase, he'll start to toss out grenades and use this rocket launcher. Luckily, these do leave him vulnerable for punish afterwards. And don't forget, use your stars to force him to stand still for just long enough to land a combo. Miss Y. Against her, you also don't want to stand in front of her for too long. That's because of her long range. Pokes come out pretty quick. It's also a losing battle if you want to bait an attack or outspace her. Instead, just do nothing but jump-ins. She has no way to fight this, so you can keep doing it until it works. And try to do some down airs too since that'll actually set up a combo, instead of the one and done forward air. But when she raises her sword and blinks white, she'll run at you and do these multi-hits as soon as you line up with her. This can be baited out luckily, so be ready to punish afterwards. She also has a grab to look out for, but just look out for the red blinking. Now for phase 2, she'll jump to either side of the room and will zoom towards you. She does 2 of these, which means she'll end up right where she began. So to stand where she was, wait there for her to come back, and then go in for an easy punish. For the last and final fight, we go up against both siblings. It's a good idea to focus Mr. Y first, since he has the furthest range. Don't want to leave him be for too long because, yeah, it'll be a hassle to deal with all those bullets, missiles, and grenades. So here's what you want to do. Just dump all your resources to take him out of the fight as fast as possible. And if you get an opening, use every star in hand to deal as much damage as possible. We won't need him for phase 2 anyways, so best to cash out here. Once we deal enough damage, he'll jump into the spider mech. Looks kinda intimidating at first, even has a wide array of attacks to pick up on. But honestly, we don't need to worry about him one bit. Because if you stay on the left side of the screen and stand right in front of that little brown triangle, you avoid every attack, 9 times out of 10. From here, you can just focus on hitting that one leg, and that's it. Also, I'd recommend to really make an effort to bring a mace into the fight because it'll make a huge difference. So no matter what the difficulty, that will always make quick work of both of them. And that's Streets of Rage 4. I've come a long way to really appreciate what makes this game work. Because a few years ago, I had mixed feelings on it, to put it nicely. But that's because I went into it with the wrong mindset. At the time, I was so used to having the freedom to just do all sorts of quick movement without caring the world. It was still in my Final Fight 3 phase, pretty much. So when this slowed me down, kinda turned me away. But I needed to realize that the slower speed was done to set this very grounded, footsie-based combat system. So no matter what we did, from positioning, movement, to what attacks we toss out and when, it had to be done with some real thought. And when we're given this many distinct enemy types to go with these varied stage layouts, I noticed how methodical this game really was. Once that hit me, it finally made sense now. It was a very eye-opening moment to truly understand what this game was going for. And I know I haven't mentioned the combo juggle system yet, but I don't think it's the main goal here. It's a draw for sure, but to me, it's all about the pure fundamentals. Because without them, how do you expect to even land that first hit to begin with? So yeah, don't get too hung up on learning all sorts of different combos and tech. That'll come later. Those basics, on the other hand, carry over to everyone, and that'll get you very far. Speaking of going far, the amount of modes to dig into is insane. Story mode is great for sure. I always like to climb the difficulty ladder here. And let me tell you, the balance is pretty good. You become more of a glass cannon, and enemies don't get bloated health bars either. So your smart plays are rewarded, and your mistakes are seen, as it should be. Then add larger crowds made up of dangerous enemies to really push you. There's also arcade mode with limited lives to really put your knowledge, skill, and consistency to the test. We get level select so you can replay your favorite stage or maybe to practice a bit before trying arcade. Even a boss rush, surprisingly. You know how I like my boss fights, so that's a favorite for sure. But there's also a pretty in-depth tutorial mode, which also includes combo trials for every single character, even a training room as well to get a feel for everyone. But here's my favorite part. We can select what enemy we want to fight. This is very underrated because it lets us have this one-on-one sort of sparring session to really understand how each of these enemies work. And lastly, the DLC gives us the survival mode with some roguelite elements. So if you needed to change things up, this is a really awesome mode to just see the madness unfold. Oh yeah, playing this mode will unlock an extra 4 or 5 moves for that character, which there's over 20 to choose from. There's just an enormous amount of quality content for everyone to enjoy. And in general, it just does so much so well for both casual and veteran players of not only the genre, but longtime fans of this franchise too. It's just a perfect example on what these games are about, and it's a shining example of what to aim for. And it's no wonder why a renaissance or resurgence happened since this game came out. It really reminded everyone why we enjoy the genre, and this wave of new releases has no signs of slowing down anytime soon. By now I'm sure this won't come off as a surprise to anyone, but it's without a doubt a part of the holy trinity of 2D beat 'em ups. And at this point I've said so much I really don't know how to end this, so get around to playing it sometime. It's kinda good.